Story number 1, the closing shift at the warehouse. So I want to start by saying I'm not really the type of person who goes online and talks about stuff like this. I've told maybe 2 people this story in real life, my girlfriend and my older brother, and both of them basically told me I was probably just tired and freaked myself out. Maybe. I don't know. I've gone back and forth on it for about 3 years now, and I still don't have a clean answer. But it happened, and I remember it clearly. And I figure putting it out here is better than it just living in my head rent-free forever. This was back when I was 23. I was working at a regional distribution warehouse outside of a mid-sized town in Ohio. Nothing glamorous. We moved boxes of hardware supplies, tools, that kind of thing. Bolts, drill bits, PVC fittings. Kind of stuff you'd find at a home improvement store. The warehouse itself was one of those long, flat, metal-sided buildings, maybe 300 feet end to end, with a loading dock on the east side and an office and break room attached to the west end like an afterthought. Someone bolted on. I'd been working there about 8 months. I was on the closing shift, which ran from 3 p.m. to midnight. On most nights there'd be 4 or 5 of us, but we were short-staffed constantly because the pay wasn't great and the turnover was high. By the time I hit that 8-month mark, I was one of the more senior people on the shift, which sounds impressive until you realize that just meant I'd stuck around longer than most. The night this happened was a Tuesday in November. 2 of the other guys on shift had called out. One had a sick kid. The other, I think, just didn't feel like coming in. And my supervisor, Marcus, had a family thing he'd been planning for months. So he left around 9 p.m. after doing a walkthrough and checking the loading dock was locked. That left me and a woman named Carla to close up. Carla was maybe 45, had worked there longer than anyone, and was the kind of person who'd trained 3 supervisors who all eventually outranked her, and she never once seemed bitter about it. I liked Carla. At around 10:40, she came and found me in aisle 7, where I was doing a last inventory count, and told me her daughter had called and there was something going on at home she needed to deal with. Nothing dangerous, just a situation. She asked if I was okay to finish the close on my own. I'd done it before, technically, though always with at least one other person somewhere in the building. I told her, yeah, go ahead, it's fine. She left at 10:44. I know the exact time because I checked my phone when I heard the side door close behind her, mostly just to calculate how much longer I had to be there. The warehouse at night, once it's fully quiet, has this particular kind of stillness to it that takes a little getting used to. The fluorescent lights hum, the heating system kicks on and off, and makes these low metallic groans that echo weird in the metal walls. After a few months you stop noticing it. It becomes background noise, the same way traffic becomes background noise if you live near a highway. I finished the count in aisle 7, logged it on the clipboard, and started making my way toward the back of the warehouse to do the last check on the emergency exits before I locked up the main floor. There are 4 emergency exits, 2 on the north wall, 1 on the south, 1 near the loading dock. Standard stuff. You just make sure the push bars are engaged and the door seals are intact. Takes maybe 10 minutes total. I did the 2 on the north wall first. Fine. I crossed to the south wall exit, which is in the back corner of the building, probably the farthest point from the office. Fine. Then I started walking toward the loading dock exit, which is down a short corridor that runs between a wall of shelving and the dock doors themselves. I was about halfway down that corridor when I stopped. I don't know what made me stop exactly. It wasn't a sound, or at least not a clear one. It was more like, you know how sometimes as your brain registers something slightly off before the rest of you catches up? Like your feet stop before you've consciously decided to stop? That's what happened. I was walking, and then I was standing there in the corridor with the clipboard in my hand, and the fluorescence buzzing overhead, and then I heard it. From behind the dock doors, which were closed and locked, I had verified this with Marcus before he left, there was a sound. A slow, deliberate sound, like someone dragging something heavy across concrete. It went for about 4 seconds. Then stopped. I stood there. My first thought, genuinely, was that something had fallen off one of the pallets out on the dock. We had a small covered staging area outside the main dock doors, where sometimes drivers would leave overflow if they missed the cutoff. A box could have shifted, toppled, something like that. That was completely reasonable. I almost talked myself into moving. Then it happened again. Same sound, same duration. About 4 seconds of dragging, then silence. Except this time it was clearly moving. The sound started on the left side of the dock doors and traveled toward the right. Whatever it wasn't falling. It was moving on its own. I backed up without really deciding to. Just stepped backward, slowly. I was out of the corridor and back on the main floor. I stood behind a shelving unit, and I'm not going to pretend I wasn't scared, because I absolutely was. My hands were doing that thing where they feel slightly disconnected from you and too light. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus. He picked up on the third ring, clearly in the middle of something, and I told him what I was hearing. He went quiet for a second and then said, and I remember this almost word for word, check the camera on Dock 2. You can pull it up on the break room monitor. I had forgotten entirely that we had cameras. I walked, quickly, staying in the main aisle, not going back near that corridor, to the break room on the west end. The monitor was an old boxy thing that sat on the counter next to the microwave. It cycled through 6 feeds. I waited for it to hit Dock 2. The staging area outside Dock 2 was empty. No boxes, no wind, nothing. But the camera on Dock 2 was pointed at the exterior. Whatever was on the other side of the dock doors, the interior side, the corridor side, wouldn't have been visible on that feed. I told Marcus this. He was quiet again, then he said he was going to call the non-emergency line and ask for a patrol car to swing by. He told me to go wait in my car and leave the building. I did not argue with this suggestion. I sat in my car in the parking lot for about 25 minutes. A patrol car came. 2 officers walked the building with the spare key Marcus had given me to give them, and they came back out and said everything was clear. No sign of entry. Loading dock was secured. Nothing on the exterior showed any evidence of tampering. One of the officers asked if there were any animals in the area, raccoons, foxes, anything that might get underneath the dock structure. I said I didn't know. I finished the close the next night with 3 other people, and I never mentioned it to any of them. I quit about 4 months later for a different job. Better pay, daylight hours. I've thought about it a lot. The rational explanation is probably an animal, something underneath the dock. A large dog, maybe. It's a warehouse on the edge of an industrial park. There's no reason a stray couldn't have been underneath there. But the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that makes me not quite believe the animal explanation, is that the sound wasn't random. It wasn't scurrying or scrambling the way an animal panicking would sound. It was slow, patient. Whatever was making it knew exactly where it was going, and it stopped the moment I stopped walking. Story number 2, the security monitor on camera 6. I've been doing security work for about 6 years now. Not the exciting kind. I'm not armed. I'm not chasing anyone down hallways. Mostly I sit. I watch monitors. I do walkthroughs on a schedule. It's the kind of job where 98% of your shifts are so uneventful they blur together, and then occasionally something happens that makes you wish you'd picked a different career. This was about 2 years into the job. I was working overnight at a mid-sized office complex. 4 buildings arranged in a square around a central courtyard, with an underground parking structure beneath the whole thing. 12 floors per building, mostly corporate tenants. Lawyers, financial firms, a few medical billing offices. The kind of place that's all business during the day and completely empty by 7 p.m. My station was a small room on the ground floor of Building A. 1 desk, 1 rolling chair, a space heater I'd brought from home, and a monitor bank showing feeds from 31 cameras spread across the whole complex. The cameras were labeled by location, P1 through P8 for the parking structure, C1 through C4 for the courtyard, and then numbered feeds for the elevator lobbies, stairwells, and main corridors of each building. Camera 6 was the south stairwell of Building A floors 1 through 12, with a camera mounted at each landing pointing downward. The feed on the monitor showed a split view of all 12 landings simultaneously in a grid. It was, genuinely, the most boring camera on the whole board. Stairwells in empty office buildings at 2 a.m. are not interesting. Nobody uses them. The cleaning crews take the service elevator. There's no reason for anyone to be in a stairwell at that hour, which is why it took me a little while to notice. I want to be clear about the timeline because I've replayed it so many times I want to get it right. My shift started at 10 p.m. I did my first scheduled walkthrough at midnight. All 4 buildings, parking structure, courtyard. Everything was exactly as it should be. I got back to my station at 12:41 a.m. and settled back in with a coffee I'd made in the small kitchen 2 doors down at some point between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m. I can't be more precise than that because I genuinely wasn't staring at camera 6. I noticed something on the feed, on the grid showing all 12 landings. There was a figure standing on the landing for floor 7, just standing there, not moving. Facing the wall, my first real thought was that someone had worked late and was taking the stairs down. Happened occasionally. Not common, but not impossible. I leaned forward and watched the feed. The figure didn't move. Didn't walk up or down. Just stood there with their back to the camera, facing the wall, completely still. I watched for probably 90 seconds before I picked up my radio and logged it. I noted the time, 1:22 a.m., and said I had a possible unauthorized individual in the south stairwell of Building A, Floor 7 landing, and that I was going to investigate. I want to be honest about what I was feeling at this point. Not particularly scared, more curious and mildly annoyed. The most likely explanation was a late worker who maybe wasn't feeling with her, someone having a rough night. People have rough nights. I took the elevator to floor 7 and came out into the main corridor, which was dark except for the emergency lighting strips along the floor. The stairwell door was to my left, maybe 30 feet away. I walked to it, pushed it open, and looked up and down the stairwell PD. Nobody on the floor 7 landing. Nobody visible above or below on the immediately adjacent landings. I stood in the doorway for a moment, listening. The stairwells in this building have this particular acoustic quality where sound carries weirdly well. If someone was walking above or below me, I would have heard footsteps, the soft squeak of shoes on the painted concrete steps. I heard nothing. I went back to my station and pulled up the Camera 6 archive on the system. Here's where it starts bothering me in a way I genuinely can't shake. The figure appeared on the floor 7, landing at 1:09 a.m. I had first noticed it at 1:22. It stood there, completely motionless, facing the wall, until 1:24 a.m. Roughly 2 minutes after I had radioed in, at 1:24, it turned around. I want to describe this carefully. It didn't move like someone who had finished thinking and decided to leave. It turned around slowly, and then it looked directly up at the camera, not in the casual way someone glances around. It turned, tilted its head up, and looked at the camera for approximately 4 seconds. And then it walked calmly down the stairs and out of frame. I went through the remaining camera feeds from that timestamp forward. I was looking for it to appear in the lobby of Building A, in the parking structure, in the courtyard. I found nothing. Wherever it went after leaving the stairwell frame, it didn't pass in front of any other camera. I filed a full incident report. The day's supervisor reviewed the footage the next morning and confirmed what I'd seen. They brought in a guy from the security company's regional office to do a review of the building's access logs, key fob records, door sensors, the works. According to the access logs, no one had entered Building A after 8:17 p.m. that night. The stairwell doors themselves are not individually monitored. They're fire doors. They don't require a key fob. They just push open from either side. So technically someone could have been in that stairwell without triggering an access event, provided they were already inside the building before 8:17 and just stayed. For over 5 hours, the regional guy's conclusion was that it was probably a maintenance worker who gotten turned around or lost track of time. Possible. I've never fully believed it, mostly because the access logs for that day showed all maintenance personnel badging out by 6:45 p.m. But I understand why they landed there. The alternative explanations don't make a lot of sense either. What I think about most is the moment it looked up at the camera. That's the part I can't find a comfortable explanation for, because the camera on floor 7 of that stairwell is mounted in the upper corner of the landing, positioned to look downward. It's not obvious. It blends into the wall. Most people who've worked in that building for years probably couldn't tell you exactly where it is without looking. Whatever that was in the stairwell, found it in about 2 seconds. I still work security. Different building now, smaller, easier. But I'll tell you something. I check camera 6 first now. Every shift, whatever the numbering system is. Whatever's the most boring, most forgettable camera on the board. I check it first because the thing I learned that night is that boring cameras are only boring until they aren't. Story number 3, the hotel hallway on the 11th floor. I used to travel a lot for work. Not glamorous travel, no nice cities, no expense account dinners. I was doing equipment inspections for a company that serviced industrial HVAC systems, which meant I spent a lot of time in mid-range business hotels in mid-sized cities, eating whatever the hotel restaurant had left on the menu at 9 p.m., and watching cable TV in rooms that all looked basically identical. After about 2 years of that schedule, I had the whole routine down cold. Check in, drop the bag, find the ice machine out of habit, even though I never actually used it, figure out which direction the elevators were, go to sleep. I was good at sleeping in hotel rooms in a way that would probably impress you. Blackout curtains, white noise from the AC unit, out in 10 minutes. This was at a hotel in a mid-sized city in Tennessee. I won't be more specific than that. It was a chain hotel, the kind with a logo you'd recognize, 10 or 11 floors, a small gym, a breakfast area that opened at 6. Normal. Completely normal. I had checked in around 8:30 p.m. after a long drive. I was on the 11th floor, which was the top floor, room 1108, which was toward the end of the hall, left side. I remember the room number because I always photograph my room number when I check into a hotel on a work trip. Habit from early on when I got lost twice in 1 week trying to find my own room. I fell asleep around 10:15 with the TV on low, which was slightly out of character for me, but I'd been tired and hadn't gotten around to turning it off. At some point, the TV must have gone into standby because when I woke up, the room was dark. The clock on the nightstand said 2:58 a.m. I lay there for a second, the way you do when you're in a hotel and there's a half-second delay between waking up and remembering where you are. Tennessee, 11th floor. HVAC inspection tomorrow morning at 7. I was about to roll over and go back to sleep when I heard a sound from the hallway. A knock. Not on my door, or at least I wasn't certain it was my door. It was that kind of muffled, indistinct knock that travels through hotel walls and you can never quite pinpoint. I ignored it. About 40 seconds later, another knock, slightly louder. Still not definitively my door, but closer to it than I'd prefer at 2:58 in the morning. I sat up. I wasn't alarmed yet, more just awake and alert in the way you get when a sound pulls you out of sleep and you're trying to calibrate whether it matters. Could be the room next door. Could be someone locked out, knocking for their traveling companion. Normal stuff, then it knocked again. 3 times. Deliberate and slow. And this time I was certain it was my door. I got up and went to the peephole. I want to be precise about this. I did not open the door. I did not call out. I just looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Or mostly empty. The hallway stretched left toward the elevators and right toward the dead end of the 11th floor, and the lights were on that dim overnight setting, maybe 40% of normal. About 15 feet to the left of my door there was a housekeeping cart, which was strange. It was almost 3 a.m. and there was a housekeeping cart in the hallway. I stood at the peephole for a while. Nothing moved. Cart just sat there. I went back to bed, honestly, because what are you going to do? I told myself someone had left it out by mistake and I went back to sleep. At 4:11 a.m. I woke up again. I know the exact time because this time I checked my phone immediately. I woke up because of a sound, and the sound was clearly and unambiguously directly outside my door. Not a knock this time, more like a slow, deliberate movement, like something being dragged or shifted along the carpeted floor of the hallway, right outside my door. I lay completely still for about 30 seconds. The sound stopped. Then it started again, slightly further away, moving toward the elevator end of the hallway. I went to the peephole a second time. The housekeeping cart had moved. It was now directly in front of my door, directly, not 15 feet away, and it was moving. Not fast, almost imperceptibly slowly, drifting toward the elevator end of the hall, the way a cart would move if someone had given it a slow push and let it roll on its own on a slightly uneven floor. There was no one pushing it. The hallway was empty in both directions as far as I could see through the peephole's fisheye view. I watched the cart roll for maybe 10 feet and then stop. I called the front desk. The woman who answered sounded like I'd woken her up, which fair enough. It was 4:11 in the morning. I told her there was a housekeeping cart in the 11th floor hallway and that it appeared to be moving on its own. and I'd also heard knocking on my door earlier. She went quiet for a second, and then said she'd send someone up to check. I stood at the peephole and waited. About 4 minutes later, the elevator at the end of the hall opened and a man in a hotel uniform came out and walked toward the cart. He stopped next to it, looked at it, looked up and down the hallway, and then pushed it back toward the elevator. He didn't knock on my door, didn't call, didn't seem particularly concerned. I called the front desk again. I asked what the deal was with the cart. The woman told me that housekeeping sometimes leaves equipment on floors overnight when they're doing early morning prep, that someone would have been up there earlier in the evening turning down rooms and must have left it. I asked if the floors were uneven enough for a cart to roll on its own. She paused and said she'd have to check with maintenance. I checked out the next morning after the inspection, a day earlier than planned, and at my own expense. I filed the cost under miscellaneous on my expense report, and my manager never asked about it. The thing I keep coming back to is simple. If someone was in that hallway at 3 a.m. using that cart and then left, and the cart was stationary for over an hour, which it appeared to be based on when I first saw it, why did it start moving again at 4 a.m.? And why did whoever was using it knock on my door first? I don't have answers. I just know I always request a room below the 5th floor now, which my coworkers think is because I'm scared of fires. I let them think that.